And you can choose how much of the ribbon of people you see. You can close it, and you can also, if it's right over Tom and the skeleton, you can actually use your cursor and move it into another spot on your screen.
So that's kind of seeing the rib cage, the pelvis. Is there a certain movement that do you want to go over the arm movement because somebody asked about bending the elbow?
I think that would be great. And I know you don't actually have 6 hands, so we'll stick with movements that only require 2 hands. And so it's a little different when the legs are long. There are more constraints.
Yeah, and this is just so they can see the arm.
Yeah, but I'm just relating back to what they did. And you can see McCoy is a little ginger.
Like this, you'll see that not as much is occurring in the rib cage and in the middle of them, because the movement is mostly done by the one arm bending.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you keep the arm straight,
Mm-hmm.
can you see how the rib cage is twisting now, and there's movement in the shoulder blades?
Mm-hmm.
Straight arm,
Mm-hmm.
which is what we want to try to do in the lesson. Same thing if I let the hand slide, I'm kind of cheating it like this, and you can see there's not much movement in the middle.
Right.
But keeping the hands together, keeping the arms fairly straight, you can see how that, like Martha said, that invites something to happen in the center of you.
Yep. It was hard not to cheat.
That's a wonderful exploration to make.
Yeah.
And
Martha said it, we do these things not really knowing we're doing it. We normally want to find the easiest way of doing something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the interesting thing about these lessons. And, you know, Martha was great on just keeping us on track so we can do the movement in a way so that we could learn something new, like Peter did today. We can learn a different way of doing something that may serve us better.
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to do legs?
Yeah, I'd like to ask about that. When the leg is long versus one leg is long versus both legs, feet are standing.
Okay.
And one of the things you can see, he's got tissue paper lungs. This is McCoy. With the cartilage around the ribs and the movement in the chest, the ability for the ribs to move in so many more different directions than we might know, those blind spots that we were talking about. And so this is inviting that whole rib basket, as we like to say, because it's really not a cage. It's a much more flexible basket. So Tom, you're doing beautifully with your 2 hands.
With the legs, this is kind of interesting because if we tilt the legs like this, we have the knees crossed, right? In this lesson, we don't have them straight.
Right.
And you can see by not crossing the knees, you can see how much movement we get in the hip joint.
Yeah.
So the pelvis doesn't really have to do as much, and the upper part of us doesn't have to do as much. But once we cross the legs, it kind of puts the hips into a more of a locked position. And now, can you really see how the pelvis is rolling and turning the spine? And you can see that even going up into his head.
Right.
Good job, Michelle, putting this guy together. McCoy is very together, good old bones.
Yeah.
And you can see the twist movement travel up the spine. So when we talk about the movement traveling farther up, and begin to see how the ribs are lifting. And for one set of ribs to come down, the other goes up.
I really see that. What about when one leg is long?
Okay, that's a good question. And this is kind of interesting because it's a head trip in a way. Okay, so now with one leg long, Yeah, and the thing is, because this leg isn't standing, you're thinking, oh, I have nothing in my way, I can roll to the side.
Right, right.
But then the interesting, and this is what we tend to call an auxiliary movement, because it helps you learn something that will make the main movement easier. But then you'll notice that you learned something in that particular way, that when you came back to this movement again, that it was possible to go just as far. And this was with the arms, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you can see with that leg down, it helps it a little easier for the pelvis to roll. But once you learn how you can move your pelvis in that way and how it can go, you'll notice that you could even do the same thing with this leg standing, because you learned something, and it also works in a standing position. Did people find it interesting that once they put the leg back up after having it straight, that they could go they could go about the same range that they could?
Yeah,
And they could go much further than they could before?
yes, I found that.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, to the other side, I already wanted to go further.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I'm thinking that would be helpful to see the skeleton kind of before, especially with the shoulder one,
Mm.
that you knew, you know, before the lesson, that you would then kind of see what you were supposed to be doing.
It's a question of whether to do it that way. It does take you much more into your head and analyzing than the experience of doing it and moving.
Right.
and plus you want to know what you're doing first.
Okay.
Because if you don't know what you're doing first, it's hard to learn something new.
Mhm.
And
True.
all of a sudden you're learning something without knowing what you do. So what's really interesting at the end of the lesson, if you can do something your old way and then your new way, and if you can go back and forth between the two, what you used to do and what you do now and how you can do it now, you really own that lesson.
That's right.
True.
Because now you know both. Oh, I can do it the way I always do it, or I can do it this way. And then if you can come up with a couple of other ways of doing it, now you're a Feldenkrais superstar.
Thanks, that really is the key
Awesome.
point of getting a chance to explore those habits that could be blind to you. Finding out, for example, that you fold the elbow and what's starting to happen with that. And
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I was doing it right now, so maybe I'll just go back and try it again, make
Right,
sure I
yeah.
was not bending.
And McCoy has his own individual characteristics, so you don't want to learn to move like McCoy. You want to find your own way.
You guys remember this at the end, right? So
Yeah.
you see
Yeah.
this twist going on in the spine. As the upper part of McCoy goes one way, and the lower part of him goes in another way. And it's interesting, I don't know if you can see it, it's interesting to see where there's a little twist going on. And actually, no, that way, this is his easier direction. There we go. He needs a little love.
And did you feel yourself awakening places you might have had blind spots about? You can see from McCoy, he's still awakening some places. We're in the spine, and since the ribs are attached to the spine, that's where you see it's very precise. Maybe it got a little clearer for you when you could feel ribs move, spine move, pelvis move. So they all matter, but they each have their own specific role to play.